I saw the message as soon as I sat down at my usual cafe table. I need a break to figure myself out. No contact. The words hit me like a cold jolt, but I didn't respond immediately. Responding impulsively would be a mistake, and I couldn't afford to lose control. I set my phone down, took a slow, deliberate breath, and analyzed the situation. This wasn't a moment for emotion. This was a moment for observation and strategy. I went over our recent conversations, her tone, her subtle cues, things I might have overlooked before. Nothing about this message was sudden. Everything led to it quietly, like a series of calculated steps I hadn't noticed until now. I mapped out the possible outcomes in my mind: comply, confront, or strategically step back. Impulsive reactions were discarded. Observation came first. For the next 2 days, I strictly followed her rules. No messages, no calls, not even excessive social media checking. Every notification on my phone was assessed before being opened. Every action she took became data to analyze, not triggers for emotion. I watched, waited, and considered. Then, on the 3rd day, during a casual scroll through social media purely observational, I saw it, a post with her tagged alongside another guy. She was smiling, relaxed, natural, as if the break she had requested was merely a bridge to someone else. I took note of every detail: the date, the context, the caption. I felt a flicker of discomfort, but I didn't let it control me. Everything was analyzed, evaluated carefully. I considered her possible motives. Was this a test to see how I would react? Had she genuinely shifted priorities? Or was it simply a clean break? I ran through multiple scenarios, in my head: escalation, clarification, strategic withdrawal. No step was taken hastily. Every reaction was deliberate and measured. Over the next 2 days, I continued my detached observation. Every post, comment, or tag she made was noted. I wasn't driven by jealousy or anger. I was gathering data. Each interaction was assessed for its potential impact, the direction she might take next, and the information it revealed. This was strategy, not emotion. I maintained distance, observed, and planned my next moves. Making sure I remained in control, by the 5th day, I drafted a response. It was neutral, composed, precise. I acknowledged the break, asked for clarity on communication boundaries, and subtly reinforced my position. Every word was chosen carefully, calm, calculated, and strategic. I anticipated her possible responses and prepared follow-ups accordingly. The goal was clear: maintain control, stay composed, and protect my own standing. The rest of the week became a study in observation. Friends, colleagues, casual interactions, they all became background noise. I focused on her actions and messages as raw data. The initial shock of her message had been acknowledged, processed, and neutralized. I realized that the next move would shape everything that followed. Her need for space, no contact message, was only the beginning. From this point forward, every action I took had to be deliberate, strategic, and unwavering. I didn't feel anger or sadness in the way people expect. At least, I didn't allow it to dictate my behavior. Every emotional reaction was noted, catalogued, and contained. Each step from responding to the message to monitoring her behavior was measured for impact and consequence. This was a game of strategy, and I was in control. Everything had changed in an instant, yet I remained composed. The message was dramatic, yes, but my response would be precise, calculated, and entirely under my control. I didn't need to react emotionally. I only needed to act logically, to observe, to analyze, and to maintain my position. The first move had been hers, but the next ones were mine, and I intended to play them carefully, deliberately, and without losing ground. The day after I sent my message, I didn't hear back. I expected that, and I wasn't impatient. I reminded myself that control wasn't about immediacy. It was about clarity, patience, and strategy. I kept my routines intact: work, errands, even small social interactions, but my mind remained alert, scanning, analyzing every piece of information that could reveal her state of mind. I noticed subtle changes immediately. Her activity online wasn't constant, but deliberate. Photos posted at precise intervals, captions carefully neutral, interactions measured. It was clear she knew I was watching. Every post was a signal, every tag a potential test. I catalogued them all mentally: likes, comments, who tagged her, timing, tone. Nothing escaped analysis. By midweek, I realized something. The break wasn't just about distance. It was about leverage. She was testing the boundaries, seeing what I would allow, what I would tolerate, how I would react. It was subtle, almost invisible to an outsider, but not to me. I treated it like a chessboard, each move deliberate, each observation critical. One wrong move, and the board would shift against me. I spent hours replaying our past conversations in my head. I dissected her words, tone, pauses, the small cues in text and in person. I remembered how she laughed at certain situations, how she deflected when topics got uncomfortable, the tiny power plays I had overlooked. Those details suddenly became crucial. They weren't trivial quirks, they were patterns. And patterns, when read correctly, reveal intent. On Thursday evening, I saw another post. This time, it was subtler. Picture of her with the same guy, just their hands barely touching. Smiles faint but genuine. No words, no caption. I didn't feel the pang of jealousy that might have hit someone else. I felt something else. Calculation. This wasn't casual. It was deliberate, strategic. She wanted me to see, wanted me to consider my next move. I didn't respond. I didn't even think about texting. I reviewed my mental playbook. My strategy remained the same: observe, analyze, and respond only when necessary. I broke down potential responses. Confrontation risked escalation. Ignoring entirely risked giving up control. A carefully worded acknowledgement could set the terms for further interaction. I leaned toward the last, knowing timing was crucial. By Friday, my observation yielded something concrete. She had been in contact with several friends I didn't know were close to her. Subtle tags, casual check-ins, nothing overt. But the pattern was clear. She was constructing a support network outside of our relationship. And yet, she left openings, gaps in timing and interaction. That suggested she still considered me significant enough to measure my reactions, enough to maintain leverage. I documented everything mentally. Every post, every comment, every subtle gesture online became a data point. I assigned potential motives: test, provocation, genuine interest elsewhere, or distraction. None of them were confirmed, but by ranking probability, I could anticipate her likely moves. That anticipation gave me power. Saturday arrived. I went through my usual routines: work, groceries, a brief walk, but my attention never strayed. I monitored her online presence carefully, noting how she interacted with the world now that I was deliberately absent. Each interaction became part of a larger map. I knew that my next action would be pivotal, not in a dramatic sense, but strategically. One wrong move, and the control I had meticulously maintained could slip away by the end of the week. I had a clear picture. The break was temporary, but the rules had changed. She had shifted tactics, testing my patience, my boundaries, my attention, and I had responded exactly as planned, with measured observation, deliberate analysis, and no emotional reaction. She would get nothing from me she hadn't earned or provoked strategically. Control wasn't about showing power overtly. It was about timing, precision, and patience. I had learned, in those silent days of watching, that every move she made revealed more than her words ever could. The chessboard was set, and I was ready. The next message, the next interaction, the next decision, those would be mine, and I would execute them with the same calm, calculated precision I had maintained since the beginning. Monday came, and I still hadn't heard from her. Not a single message. I didn't panic. That wasn't how I operated. Patience was part of the strategy. Every move had to be measured. I kept my routines, went to work, ran errands, and even met a friend for coffee, but my mind was never idle. I reviewed every interaction, replayed our past conversations, and catalogued her online behavior in meticulous detail. She hadn't posted anything new yet, but her previous posts continued to ripple through her network. Likes, comments, subtle tags, all data points. Each one told me something about her state of mind, her priorities, and how much she might be testing me. I analyzed the timing of each interaction, what time of day, what pattern, what response it might provoke in me. Everything was a signal. Nothing was accidental. By mid-afternoon, I noticed a subtle shift. One of her posts received a comment from a friend I didn't know she was close with. The tone wasn't overt, but the implications were clear. She was quietly rebuilding her world, one interaction at a time, outside of me. And yet, she left small cracks, gaps in communication and post-signaling that I was still relevant, still part of the pattern she was testing. I catalogued the possibilities: attention-seeking, testing boundaries, genuine distance, or a mix of all three. I didn't respond. I didn't reach out. I stayed silent. That was deliberate. Any premature reaction would reveal too much, give away control. I observed and calculated. I imagined every possible outcome, mentally rehearsed every scenario. What if she reached out? What if she ignored me entirely? What if she escalated by posting more public interactions with the other guy? For each, I had a plan. My response would be precise, measured, and fully under my control. Evening came, and she posted something new. A casual photo, just her at a cafe, alone, smiling slightly at the camera. Nothing dramatic, nothing to provoke, but it was deliberate. She was showing independence, a signal to herself, to me, to anyone watching. I registered it, analyzed it, and filed it mentally. Her pattern was emerging: controlled visibility, testing boundaries, assessing my reaction. And my reaction was non-silent, strategic, patient. By the end of Monday, I had a clear mental map of her behavior. I could see the patterns forming, her timing, her interactions, the way she curated her image online. Every post, every subtle tag, every public interaction was a piece of the puzzle. And I had positioned myself to observe without emotion, to respond without haste, and to maintain control. The quiet days stretched into Tuesday. I continued my routines, observed and analyzed. I didn't feel anger or anxiety. I felt focus. Each observation became data, each behavior a clue. I mentally recorded everything, predicting her next move, planning my next message, calculating the effect of my silence. This wasn't indifference. It was strategy. And strategy required discipline, patience, and control. By midweek, it became clear that she was monitoring me as much as I was monitoring her. Likes on old photos, subtle interactions, patterns of activity, was as if she were testing the boundaries I had silently set. I noted them all. I calculated timing, possible motives, and potential reactions. I rehearsed my responses in my mind, never rushing, never reacting prematurely. Each step had to be deliberate. I understood the unspoken rules of the break. It wasn't simply about space. It was about control, leverage, and strategy. She had taken her first move, but I was setting the pace from now on. The game was unfolding, and I was ready to play it with calculated precision. Every interaction, every observation, every silent decision would shape what came next. And I intended to maintain the upper hand as calmly and deliberately as I had from the very beginning. Thursday morning arrived, and I finally decided it was time to act. Not impulsively, not emotionally, but strategically. I had observed her patterns for days, analyzed her behavior, and mentally rehearsed my response from every possible angle. This was my move, and I intended to execute it with precision. I drafted a message carefully, each word chosen deliberately. It acknowledged her request for space, set clear boundaries, and subtly asserted my expectations. I didn't demand an explanation, didn't beg, didn't show frustration. Instead, I was calm, concise, and calculated. Timing was key-centered during her usual morning check-in window, when she would be most likely to see and consider it. Minutes felt like hours. I watched for signs, monitored her online activity, noting every flicker of engagement. A like, a comment, or even a subtle status change could reveal how she was processing the message. But I waited, unshaken. My silence, before and after sending, was part of the strategy. Every delay, every pause, communicated as much as the words themselves. By mid-afternoon, her response came, but not in the way I expected. She didn't write directly to me. Instead, she posted a photo on social media, tagged another friend, and added a caption that could have been harmless to anyone else, but to me, it was a clear signal. She was testing boundaries again, gauging whether I would react, whether I would escalate, whether I would show vulnerability. I didn't react immediately. I studied the post carefully, noting the timing, the phrasing, the context, and the intended audience. Every detail was a clue, every interaction a potential data point. I considered all possible interpretations, a genuine expression, a test, or a provocation. Each carried different risks and required different responses. By evening, I drafted a second, even more measured message. It was brief, composed, and intentional. It reaffirmed my boundaries, acknowledged her communication style, and left the door open for her to respond on her terms, but only if she chose to. Every word was designed to maintain control, preserve my dignity, and minimize emotional exposure. As I hit send, I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly. Not relief, not satisfaction, but control. That was the key. She had made her moves. Now I had made mine. The next phase of the interaction was in motion, and I would observe, analyze, and respond as necessary. Patience was still the weapon. Impulse would be my enemy. The hours stretched into night. Her online activity slowed, and I had no immediate response. But that didn't unsettle me. I had anticipated silence as a likely scenario, a chance for her to process, reflect, or test me further. I reviewed her past behavior, noting how she had reacted to indirect challenges and delays. Patterns emerged. Subtle escalation, followed by retreat. Minor tests followed by pauses. Measured provocations, followed by reflection. I integrated these observations into my ongoing strategy by the end of the day. I had a clear understanding of the dynamics at play. The break, the posts, the tests, they were all part of her attempt to assert agency, gauge reactions, and maintain control in her own way. And I had maintained mine. Every observation, every pause, every calculated message had reinforced my position. I was not reacting to her whims. I was controlling my own actions, and that was the true measure of power in this interaction. Thursday closed with quiet reflection. I reviewed everything: messages sent, posts observed, behavioral patterns recorded. I didn't feel victorious or vindicated. I felt prepared. The next steps would matter, but I had set the stage strategically. She had started the game, but I was dictating the pace now. Every future move would be informed, deliberate, and under my control. Friday morning, I noticed something that immediately caught my attention. She hadn't responded to my carefully crafted messages, but she had tagged me indirectly in a public post, something subtle yet unmistakable. A photo from a group gathering with mutual friends, where she looked effortlessly happy, laughing with someone I didn't recognize well. The caption was vague, but clearly intentional. It wasn't just social, it was a test. I studied the post closely. Timing, composition, the friends included, the reactions from others, every detail mattered. She was measuring, probing, seeing how I would react. My first impulse might have been irritation, maybe even defensiveness, but I suppressed it. Observing, calculating, and patience remained my tools. Every second I held back strengthened my position. By late morning, the pattern became undeniable. She was escalating subtly, testing boundaries more boldly. Each post, each like, each comment was a calibrated move. She wasn't just maintaining distance. She was deliberately inserting herself into my awareness, provoking curiosity, or perhaps frustration. I didn't respond, didn't like, didn't comment. I only observed. Midday brought another signal. One of her friends reached out to me, directly innocuous on the surface, but layered with implications. A casual question about mutual plans, phrased carefully, testing whether I would reveal impatience, curiosity, or anger. I answered politely, neutrally, providing no emotional clue. Every word calculated, every pause deliberate. No control, always control. By the afternoon, I noticed a change in her posting behavior. She was curating her online presence with even more care, subtly flaunting independence, yet leaving deliberate openings for me to notice. The strategy was clear. She was demonstrating autonomy while ensuring I remained engaged on her terms. But I didn't give her that leverage. My silence was the counterweight, a calm anchor amidst her strategic maneuvers. Evening arrived with another post, this one more direct. A story tag on social media, where she appeared briefly with someone who looked like a new acquaintance. Her smile was easy, carefree, almost challenging. It was not overt, not aggressive, but calculated. She wanted to gauge my reaction, to see if my carefully maintained composure would falter. But I stayed silent. I documented, analyzed, and filed it mentally. No reaction was a statement in itself. By nightfall, I had mapped the escalation clearly. Her behavior was intentional, testing boundaries, assessing reactions, maintaining visibility, and subtly prompting engagement. Every step I took, every observation I recorded, was part of my ongoing strategy. I hadn't been provoked, hadn't reacted impulsively, and that gave me an invisible upper hand. She might have thought she was pushing, but I was always several steps ahead. I reviewed the week's interactions once more. Her posts, tags, friend messages, all of it formed a pattern. She had tried to provoke, to elicit emotion, to pull me into her orbit. And yet, I had maintained calm, precision, and control. The game had escalated, but my strategy remained intact. The lesson was clear. Maintaining composure, patience, and calculated action created power that overt emotion could never achieve. Friday ended quietly, but the tension was palpable. The chessboard was set, the moves had been made, and I remained in control. Her escalation had tested me, challenged me, but had not altered my strategy. I had not lost composure, had not revealed weakness, and had turned every subtle provocation into valuable information. The next phase would require even greater calculation, and I was ready. Saturday morning, I woke with a clear sense that today would change everything. Her activity online had shifted subtly, overnight posts, carefully timed, interactions more deliberate, captions ambiguous yet pointed. She had moved from testing boundaries to applying pressure. It was no longer a gentle probe. It was a challenge. And I was ready. By late morning, a direct signal arrived. She tagged me in a story, brief but unmistakable, a short video clip of her laughing with someone else. The camera angled so that I could see her expression clearly. It was subtle, strategic, almost a dare. I didn't respond. I didn't react. But I analyzed every frame. Her posture, the tilt of her head, the set of her shoulders, all gave me information. Every detail mattered, every second recorded in my mind. I sat down, pulled up my mental map of the week, and ran through all possible responses. Confrontation could backfire, emotional reaction could be exploited, and silence could invite escalation, but also reinforced my control. I decided on the latter, with one condition. I would escalate my observation to match her intensity. Every post, every interaction, every subtle signal would be documented, categorized, and analyzed. No detail too small, no nuance overlooked. By mid-afternoon, the tension escalated further. Mutual friends began tagging her in events I wasn't invited to. She smiled, posed, curated her presence, signaling independence, strength, and, unmistakably, testing my patience. I observed carefully, maintaining my calm. Each post she made, each subtle provocation, was converted into data. The more she pushed, the more I reinforced my strategic position. Later that evening, a private message arrived, but not from her directly. It was from a friend, forwarded in a casual tone, conveying information about her plans, her moods, and subtle hints about her expectations. I read carefully, not reacting emotionally, not sending any immediate reply. Every line was a potential clue, every word carefully weighed. I catalogued the information and integrated it into my mental strategy by nightfall. I had drawn a clear conclusion. She was testing the limits of my composure, the precision of my patience, and the consistency of my strategic silence. The turning point was not a single action, but a combination of pattern that revealed intent, behavior, and character. I wasn't being provoked. I was being observed, and I was observing right back. I reflected on everything I had learned so far. Her behavior revealed much about her motives, her fears, and her need to assert control, but it also revealed weaknesses, moments of hesitation, and cracks in her strategy. I mentally prepared my next move. It would not be reactionary, it would not be emotional, it would be calculated, precise, and decisive. This was the culmination of days of observation and strategy, the moment where patience, calculation, and control would determine the course of what came next. Saturday closed with quiet certainty. The chessboard had shifted slightly, the stakes were higher, and the tension was at its peak. I had maintained control throughout, and now, armed with detailed observation and analysis, I was ready to act decisively when the moment presented itself. The turning point had arrived, and the next move would be mine, deliberate, cold, and strategic. Sunday morning, I woke with a sense of focus that was almost surgical. After a week of watching, analyzing, and calculating, it was clear that today would be decisive. Every post she had made, every subtle tag, every casual interaction, all of it formed a pattern I had been mapping in my mind. The pieces were aligned, and it was time to execute the final move with precision. I drafted a message carefully, reading and rereading each word. It wasn't long, and it wasn't emotional. It acknowledged her space, clearly stated my boundaries, and left no ambiguity. I avoided accusations, apologies, or dramatics. Every word was deliberate, every sentence purposeful. I wanted to communicate clarity, not chaos. This was the culmination of days of observation, and I intended to finish it on my terms. Minutes passed after sending the message. I didn't watch for an immediate response. Instead, I monitored subtly, noting her activity online. A story viewed, a minor post, a comment here and there, each was a signal, and each was filed mentally. The silence itself was a tool, reinforcing the position I had maintained all week, calm, calculated, and in control. By mid-afternoon, a subtle response arrived. Not dramatic, not emotional, but clear acknowledgement. An apology couched in neutral language, and an attempt to explain her actions. I read each word carefully, measured the tone, the timing, and the implications. My response was deliberate. I addressed her acknowledgement, reinforced the boundaries, and made clear the conditions for any further interaction. Every word was strategic, precise, and controlled. Evening brought reflection. The tension that had been building for days now settled into clarity. I considered every action from the week, her posts, tags, comments, and subtle provocations. Each had been designed to test me, to measure my patience and control, and each had been met with calm, observation, and strategy. I hadn't reacted impulsively. I hadn't allowed emotion to dictate action. I had turned the entire sequence into information, insight, and leverage. I reflected further, noticing the subtle lessons embedded in the experience. Control doesn't come from force or aggression. It doesn't come from outbursts or confrontation. Control comes from observation, patience, calculation, and discipline. Every provocation, every signal, and every subtle test from her had been transformed into actionable data. I had navigated the entire week like a chess game, maintaining composure while anticipating every possible move. By nightfall, her activity online had ceased. The posts, Tags and interactions that had been carefully monitored now fell silent. It wasn't dramatic, but it was decisive. The break had run its course, the tests had been revealed, and the patterns had been understood. I realized that the game had been about more than her or MIT had been about clarity, control, and strategy under pressure. As I sat quietly, reflecting on the week, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction in a conventional sense. What I felt was something far more precise: calm, certainty, and understanding. The drama had ended, but the insights remained. The week had tested patience, willpower, and strategic thinking. I had endured every subtle challenge, maintained control, and emerged with both clarity and authority. Sunday night closed with quiet resolution. The posts and messages had ceased. The tension dissolved. What remained was the lesson. True control lies in observation, calculation, and measured action. Reaction without strategy is weakness. Emotion without restraint is vulnerability. By maintaining discipline, composure, and strategic thought, I had navigated the complexities of the week and maintained the upper hand throughout. In the end, the break, the provocations, and the challenges revealed something fundamental. Power is not loud, not aggressive, not reactive. Power is quiet, calculated, and deliberate. And after 7 days of observation and strategy, I had proven that even in the most emotionally charged situations, patience and intelligence dominate. The chessboard had been cleared, the moves had been made, and the final outcome was controlled, deliberate, and unshaken.